Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Milton Warrant Committee. We have a number of items on the agenda. We have a number of guests, and I'm happy to call the meeting to order. Lynn, can you please take the roll?
Sure, George. We have Kathy, John, JJ, Lorraine, George, Kristen, Dave, Stephen, Emily, and if I missed any, Christine. If I missed
Great.
anybody else, please shout out right now.
So we do have a quorum, and we also have in attendance members of the Select Board, and Chairwoman Katie Conlon is on. And Katie, do you want to convene your meeting while we're here simultaneously, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So our board, the Select Board, is meeting jointly with the Warrant Committee this evening. You have a longer agenda than we do, so we're here for the items. The members who are here, my name is Katie Conlon. I'm the chair. We have Arthur Doyle, our vice chair, Mike Zulus, who's the secretary, Melinda Collins, Richard Wells. We're also joined by Town Administrator Michael Dennehy, Finance Director Karen Preval, and Brian Walsh, the chair of the Fire Building Committee, in case there are any questions on that article.
Terrific. Thank you very much. You are called to order then.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So we're calling our meeting to order and joining.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting us.
Well, welcome. We're always happy to have you on board. It's great to have you here because you can answer questions that often come up. Our first order of business, I will just remind those of you presenting that our rules entitled the presenter to 7 minutes of presentation time, and that presenter can invite questions along the way or hold them until the end. But we are, because of the length of the agenda, going to be observing it as we ordinarily do, and we appreciate your concise presentations. Our first order of business is to review and vote on the minutes of our April 26th and June 28th meetings, which you've all received electronically. Has anybody any amendments, additions, deletions to either of those meetings?
No.
Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion to accept those meeting minutes as presented.
So moved.
Second. Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor. Lynn, please take the roll.
Kathy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
JJ,
Yes.
Lorraine,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Christine,
Yes.
Kristen,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Emily.
Yes.
Terrific. It passes. Next on the agenda is the update on the American Rescue Plan Act funds, which we've been hearing about now for several months. And the questions about this do come up with some frequency in our deliberations, and I know are of interest to the town meeting. So, Katie, are you and Mike going to handle this, or Mike Dennehy, you're on board? Yes.
Mr. Chair, Mike Dennehy just sent me a text that he's having trouble with his video connection, so he's here by telephone. But
okay.
Mike Zulus and Mike Dennehy are going to discuss this.
Perfect. Okay, gentlemen, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair Conlon, members of the committee. My name's Mike Dennehy. I'm the town administrator. I apologize. My town laptop is literally imploding in front of me here. But I am
not a good sign. Maybe we can use some of the money to buy you a new one.
It's very restrictive funding, George. I'm not sure if it would qualify. No.
Okay. Well, anyway, we're interested to hear what we can use it for.
Sure. So Karen Preval, who's on the call here tonight, is fully entrenched. It's a very large document that the federal government sent us. The long and short of it is there's some restrictive funding that comes along with this. It's not as ambiguous as the CARES money was. And the other caveat that goes with it is the amount of transparency and public presentation we have to do with this. The CARES money, we filed for it, we paid for it, and then we were reimbursed for all COVID-related expenses. These ARPA funds do come with some strings attached to them. Namely, there's some project-specific requests that this funding comes from. And for those watching, it's the American Rescue Plan Act. So Milton is basically, the town of Milton is basically looking at two sources of funding. The first source of funding is $2.888 million that will come directly to the town in 2 installments. About a month ago, Treasurer McAuliffe received that first portion, $1.444 million. So I can speak to the operations side of it, and then Member Zulus can speak to the process and procedure involved. So basically, I was tasked with reaching out to my department heads, understanding that we had $1.444 million of federal money with some time sensitivity attached to it. These funds have to be spent by the end of December 2024. They're basically for municipal broadband and water and sewer infrastructure like projects. There are some COVID related features to that. So what I did was I talked to my department heads and asked them what would be in the pipeline, knowing that we have $1.444 million sitting in a bank account dedicated to this. From that process, and understandably, construction and redoing some of the infrastructure in town was most prevalent. And we've been able to identify a couple of public works projects. Having worked through this before in 2009 with the ARA funding that came in during the Obama administration, in my capacity in Boston as a public works director, the need to spend this money soon is very important. And the only reason I say that, by no means are we rushing to spend this money, but as these projects take place and these projects get bid and these funding sources come into the towns, you have a limited amount of contractors that can do the work. And as we've seen in many instances throughout the country, the supply chains are either have dried up or become attached with a premium. So I think it would be in the best interest, and I suggested to my board at their meeting a couple of weeks ago that we take $1 million of this 1.444 million and dedicate it to a water and sewer water main improvement project that just went out to bid in the Belvoir Road, Cheever, Hudson, Prince, and Dexter Street neighborhood. It does a couple of things. It allows us to free up our MWRA money. So we have a limited amount of MWRA zero interest money that we get every year. If we can utilize some of this ARPA money for that, that would give us the ability to stretch that MWRA elastic band and get to another project in the pipeline this year. Additionally, and I know I'm taking up a lot of time, Mr. Chair, we do have other funding coming to the town through Norfolk County. So about a month ago, Norfolk County Treasurer and Norfolk County Commissioners voted that Norfolk County Treasurer Bellotti apply to accept the funds, $137 million for the county collectively, specifically $5.4 million for the town of Milton. Next Wednesday, August 23rd, I will be joining a conference call with the county commissioners and other Norfolk County managers for guidance on that money. I will assume that $5.4 million will be as restrictive, if not further restricted by the Norfolk County Commissioners. But in essence, the town will be looking to receive $2.7 million this year and another $2.7 million next year. So I will turn it over to Member Zulus to speak to the process and procedure. And if there are any questions after, I will certainly answer them.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much. Councilmember Zulus, we're happy to hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very briefly, I'll address the procedure that we're proposing for the allocation of this funding. The decision on the allocation for this funding is atypical for the town of Milton. Typically, as you all know, funding is appropriated by town meeting. The ARPA funding is appropriated by the executive authority of the town, which is the select board. So it is a select board decision. So our purpose over the last month, particularly our finance committee of the select board, was to recommend a procedure that would allow for public input, transparency, and the best decision-making possible for the select board. So what we came up with in our finance committee, which is Arthur Doyle and myself, recommended to the select board, and the select board approved a procedure by which we would have public hearing, and we have a public hearing tomorrow night on this proposal that has been made by the administration for the $1 million allocation for the sewer project, which, by the way, has been recommended by the Finance Committee of the Select Board, but has not been acted on by the Select Board. So tomorrow night, we have a public hearing to solicit input about this. And also, this is part of the process as well, because we thought it was important both to solicit input from the residents and to get feedback from the Warrant Committee, because the Warrant Committee is deeply involved in our budget process typically. And so we didn't want to take any actions without getting your, making the presentation to you and getting some feedback from you. So that's what this is, to really present the proposal from the town administrator here. The Select Board will act on this. I suspect, given the desire to move forward, Select Board may act on this before the end of this month, but we'll see what the public hearing results in tomorrow, and we'll see what other residents have to say. We'll see what the Warrant Committee has to say, and I'm sure the Select Board members will all take that into consideration in making this decision. As Mike Dennehy pointed out, this is the proposal from the town administrator and the town administration is to allocate $1 million of the 1.44 million now. The expectation is that the first tranche of that county money, the 2.77 of the 5.5 roughly from the county, the expectation is that that will come in sometime in the fall. And then the expectation is that the balance of the money coming directly to Milton, the 1.44, expectation is that that'll come in sometime next June. And also that the balance of the county money, the balance, which would be the other 2.77 of the 5.5, that'll come in sometime mid next year. So that's what we're thinking in terms of the timing. We're seeking, making the presentation and seeking feedback on this first proposal for the sewer project. The Finance Subcommittee thinks it's a way to put this money to work for the town for a shovel-ready project in short order, so that we can make the best use of these funds. That's, I think, the view of the Finance Committee of the Select Board. So I'll stop there and ask for whatever you want us to do, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I have two questions. Is the shovel readiness of the project up on Dexter and Edneck and Prince Street, those areas, the money that would be used for it, that's currently budgeted for it, would that be able to be reallocated, would it go into the general fund, et cetera, et cetera? I mean, because we have looked for some of this money to subsidize some of the needs that we were unable to fund. And as the Warrant Committee, we all know, because we went through these iterations, I forget how many meetings we had about it, but to free up any money that would come in, I guess the question is, how will that be allocated, or is that decided yet?
So, and Mike Dennehy can go into this a little bit more at length, but I think he alluded to Mike Dennehy alluded to the fact that using these funds for this sewer project will allow us to free up additional funds for other sewer and water projects for the zero interest loan from the MWRA.
Right. So additional money coming in. For example, we had all kinds of questions, and Warrant Committee, please chime in anytime. We had questions about funding positions for the school department with some money that we were anticipating coming in. Is that a possibility with any of these funds?
It hasn't been proposed as yet by the school department. It seems to me that there are, in addition to sewer and water and municipal infrastructure projects, there are COVID-related uses for this funding. So to the extent there are COVID-related uses that can be expended during the fiscal years of 22 and 23, by the end of December 31st, 2024, then theoretically those funds could be used for COVID-related purposes from the schools.
Okay. Questions from the Warrant Committee? Kathy, please.
Yes, is it safe to say that this water project is something that was on the capital improvement list that we looked at earlier this year? And also my second part of the question is, assuming we're using this money for that, will this give us room for some of the other projects that we had to defer?
If I can answer that, Mr. Chair. Kathy, yes, it is. Yep. So this this project was in the pipeline, as our town engineer, Marina Fernandez, eloquently spoke at the Finance Subcommittee meeting a couple of weeks ago. There was a scientific audit of the town's water and sewer infrastructure, and they then prioritized projects in the town. This is at the top of their list. The next project is in the Magnolia area of town, Taylor, Bonad, Clapp Streets. That neighborhood just underwent a gas infrastructure work. That's why those streets haven't been repaved. We still have some water and sewer utility work to be done there. So the idea is to tick off these projects that were prioritized through this scientific audit that the Public Works Department engaged a couple of years ago, and free up money to do other projects. But specific capital projects, Kathy, that you sat on that committee, let's say, for instance, we wanted to add another $1 million to Public Works roadway.
Yep.
That might be restricted in these dollars, and might not qualify for it. I hope that answers your question.
Okay.
We're
and
getting
thank-
further down our construction project list from a water and sewer main perspective, but not necessarily things that might have got shut out for the library as a capital project. They may not qualify due to the restrictiveness of this ARPA funding.
Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions? What is the timing of the disbursements? Just for the record, is it clear when particularly the second part of the 2.8888 is coming in?
So, and Mike, you can correct me, but my understanding is our expectation is we'll get the first tranche of the county money, the 2.77, sometime this fall, September, October timeframe. The second part of the 2.88 we anticipate next June.
Okay.
And the second part of the 5.5 from the county, again, we anticipate sometime, I believe, in the next, sometime mid next year. That's what we anticipate. Mike, Mike can correct me if I'm wrong.
I concur.
And the process for of dispersing these funds will be handled as you've described, with public input, not necessarily as we do with the town meeting process that the Warrant Committee is part of, but we will have an input, but the actual disbursement and control will be through the Select Board and Town Administrator with public input.
It's actually the decision point here is with the executive authority of town, which is the Select Board. But
Right.
the commitment of the Select Board is to get public input on this and to be as transparent as possible and get input from the Warrant Committee. And I imagine there'll be I don't want to speak too soon, but I imagine there'll be a presentation to town meeting on this as well.
Yeah, I think that would be something everybody would welcome. And as you come up with the actual details, we'll be very happy to hear from you and to give you our input as needed. This is not a reticent group, as you know.
That's correct, right?
Any other questions?
All too well.
Yes. Any other questions for Mike Dennehy and Mike Zulus? Hearing none. Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry, Christine Gimber.
Hi there. Sorry, quick question. You kind of very broadly categorized the act as the ability to spend the money is kind of restricted. Can you elaborate on that a little? I'm trying to look at it online, and
So the infrastructure funding, Christine, the infrastructure purposes under ARPA are restricted to sewer, water, and municipal broadband. Three things in terms of infrastructure. But there are an extensive list and of COVID-related purposes that can be used for that funding, which Mike Dennehy, you might be able to fill in more. But beyond the infrastructure purposes, there are COVID-related purposes as well.
That's correct. Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning, we still have approximately $280,000 worth of CARES money that has to be expended by that was extended to December 31st of this year. It had been December 30th of 2020. That funding was extended. So PPE and other things related to that, COVID testing. My board gave me the authority to start COVID testing on the 29th of August. So stuff like that, we're still spending through the CARES. So there is very strictly COVID-related funding that people were very familiar with last year, that will be used for CARES funding as well, since we still have that pool of money to access and
Mike,
use. Sure.
Mike, can you give us an idea of what the ARPA COVID-related expenses would be covered?
I believe it's very similar, George. So
Okay.
PPE and things like that are still covered. LEPC, which is our local emergency planning committee, Lieutenant Chuck Caputo from the Milton Police Department chimed in on both ARPA funding and CARES money, and he's come up with some alternatives for making sure if this committee's well aware of the run on the bank that we had when COVID was first introduced and the lack of PPE and supply chain there. So the idea is to stock up on most of those COVID related expenses through the CARES money that we still have.
Okay.
Purchase a trailer to hold that stuff so that we have it in perpetuity for when and if. But no COVID related expenditures have been identified at this point because we still have the CARES money that we're working through.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Gentlemen, thank you very much. We appreciate your coming and talking to us about this. Our next agenda item is a presentation by the Broadband Committee. And Mike Zulus, we have you here. Did you bring anyone else with you?
I brought, and well, I didn't bring him. He appeared on his own, and that's Rob Lynch, who's the good-looking man in the tie on your screen. And Rob is the secretary, serves on the Municipal Broadband Committee, as I do. And Rob is going to take it away. And I believe Rob has a presentation if he wants to give it. But Rob, take it.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I do have a presentation.
Rob, you didn't have to get dressed up for us, but we're flattered you did. But
yeah,
again,
you guys are impressed, right?
yeah, it doesn't get you extra points though.
We all dress
right.
up on the Broadband Committee. We all dress up.
Yeah, we're just impressed, but I will remind you that we keep the presentation to 7 minutes.
Okay. Yep.
Thanks. Okay, so hit it.
All right. So I have. I'm going to share my screen here on the slideshow. So this presentation is regarding replacing the iNet. It's the same presentation we presented to the select board recently, so it'll be a refresher for them. Mr. Zulus also will have a brief update when I'm finished with the presentation on some recent events since we prepared this presentation. Today, we're going to cover what the iNet is, why we need to replace it, why we should do it now, and how we will pay for it. So the iNet is the town's institutional network. It connects all municipal buildings and schools. It's physically owned and maintained by Comcast, and they service it as part of the cable franchise agreement, but it's operated by the town itself. Some of the key uses for it are internet access for the town's facilities and for the schools. Serves as an internal network for the town and its schools also. It connects office phones for voice over IP. It also serves for the police and fire emergency radio and police street cameras. So why do we need to replace the iNet now? So Comcast is only, in this recent agreement, has only committed to supporting the iNet through 2024. As I'll get to in a little bit, they've indicated that they don't want to continue to service it beyond that. There's an earlier termination date in the agreement of April 2022. That would be the town's prerogative. So that's really just to highlight that we could terminate the agreement earlier if we wanted to move forward quicker on the iNet construction. The current state of the iNet is that it's inadequate. It's only a few strands of fiber. I believe it's 8, and only 6 of them are functional. We've been told in our consultations with the town's IT department and the school IT department that the fiber is pretty much maxed out capacity. The most recent updates, I believe I have the anecdote right, but I believe that on the most recent updates regarding the police and fire communications, they really hit the maximum on available bandwidth on the current iNet. So the iNets, so what are the alternatives to the current situation with the iNet? So one is, can we extend the current agreement with Comcast? The answer appears to be no. Comcast indicated that the iNet is technically obsolete and that they're not interested in staying in the space of maintaining institutional networks. It's not profitable for them, and they don't want to continue to service an obsolete system. And then to similar vein, Comcast is also not interested in handling the replacement of the iNet itself. So what are our other options? We could always try to approach Comcast or RCN as a commercial customer to just buy commercial internet service from Comcast or RCN. But there's a host of problems with that as well. Obviously, we'd be limited in service to whatever we were paying for. Also, with such important emergency and school services tied to that system, you don't really want to be a captive customer where you have to pay what the provider says to pay, because you don't really have a lot of room to negotiate with such important services. So we believe that a town-owned network is the most effective way to support the town's needs, and I'll get to that in just a moment. So why should we build the town's network? So the town, for one, as I mentioned, the town services, essential services depend on the iNet. So the town having control over the iNet allows it to better control its own fate. By replacing the iNet now, we can match the limited capacity that it has right now, right away. And we can also lay down additional fiber that will be able to meet growing demands on internet service, which obviously this year with the pandemic has shown that work from home and school services, a lot of people depend on fast and reliable internet. Again, as I mentioned, that trying to become a commercial service, a commercial customer to Comcast or RCN services has a whole host of problems. We're at the mercy for them for cost and items like that. Town-owned iNet is also a down payment on the residential municipal service. So I want to emphasize 2 points here. One is, it's the opinion of our committee that the iNet is technically obsolete based on the expert report that we've received. So we believe it needs to be replaced no matter what, regardless of whether or not the town wants to explore a separate residential service. But the replacement of the iNet serves essentially as a down payment on the residential service, in the sense that the residential service will need a backbone, to essentially the main roads of the internet service for the residential service to branch off of. So by replacing the iNet, we're also essentially setting up, because the iNet itself will likely have, I believe that the CTC report they received, that it would probably be at least 100 strands versus the 8 that they have now. So we'd have more than enough capacity for the town's municipal and school services itself, while also having extra fiber that could be used by the residential service if that was a feasible option. And the committee itself right now is currently still exploring residential service as an option.
Rob, I'm giving you your 2-minute warning.
Okay, yep, thank you. So we have a high level cost design and cost estimate, as I mentioned, from CTC. It was from January 2019. The estimated high cost for construction was $982,000. It will likely need some modest updating with inflation and potentially some other minor adjustments. We don't have any reason to think that there's a significant change to that number. Ongoing maintenance cost, we think, would be, we don't have accurate figures on that yet. We believe that would be more appropriate once there's an engineer involved that can prepare a more detailed plan.
You want to swim or walk?
So just to reiterate, Comcast, we have a looming deadline with Comcast. We have a high network design from CTC, so we have a game plan, and the ARPA funds being available. It's created, it's one of the few uses. Broadband service is one of the few infrastructure uses that we can use for ARPA funds. And obviously, as I mentioned before, the pandemic has demonstrated the importance of fast and reliable internet in the town. So our proposal for paying for it, there's 3 options. It's the federal ARPA funds, which Mr. Dennehy just went over. It's the town's cable fund, which is part of that agreement with Comcast. So there's a balance in that of about $750,000. and the fallback would be if neither, or if both these options don't cover, it would be bonding. So as I mentioned, one of the uses for ARPA funds is broadband infrastructure. It's highlighted below. So our request is to identify the INET as replacement as a priority and a possibility for ARPA funding, and for the article that we're proposing for the town meeting is to use a portion of the cable funds. We'd be deferring to the select board, the warrant committee, town administrator, the appropriate parties in terms of what mixture of ARPA funds and cable funds would be appropriate. Obviously, we understand there's other projects with priority, with the select board determining the priorities, and so we know there'd be a mix of funds that would be used. So we would defer on that, but we just want to identify the funds that could be used. So that this last slide here shows the article that we've proposed. You'll note that we don't have a specific dollar amount on the request from the cable fund, since that would be something we would defer on. We just want to identify it as a use of the funds for this important project. So thank you for your time.
No, excellent. This is well done. Right on the nose. Congratulations. So first question, I guess we pose, if not to your committee, then possibly to the select board and the town administrator. What would be the request? Would we be looking for the warrant committee to recommend to town meeting the 982,000 or round it out to $1 million if the ancillary costs over the past year and a half have grown that much? Is that what we're looking at? I think you have, if I can paraphrase some of the comments that I've heard from the warrant committee over the last couple of years when we've been talking about this, is there is, I think, uniform support for this. And the question is, how much is it going to cost? Now we have an idea. Is this what you're asking for, the 982 or the million? And then corollary to that is, where's the money going to come from specifically?
George, if I could respond to that.
Sure.
So this article that we're seeking the warrant committee support for seeks funding from the cable fund, of which there is $751,000 available. We will make the broadband committee and ultimately the select board, I believe, will make a recommendation on that number, hopefully sooner rather than later. But the thought is that there will be a mix. There will be some portion of that 982, or roughly $1 million, that will come from the cable fund. We wouldn't recommend, I believe, depleting that cable fund completely. Perhaps we would recommend using $350,000 from the cable fund and $650 from ARPA in order to get this done. There is an issue about, we wanted to make sure that this was an appropriate use of the cable fund money. One of the uses is to support MPEG access. And so the idea is you're supporting access because you're repairing the wires over which MPEG provides access to the town and the schools.
Yep.
Town council looked at this. Town council thought it was appropriate. And town council has also reached out to the Division of Local Services, DOR, and has had a favorable report just today on the use of the cable fund for that purpose. And Kevin Freitag from the town council office is here. He can go into that in more depth if you want about what DLS's view of this is. But our request now is support the article, and then we'll come back with a proposed number once we sit down and talk with the town administrator and figure out what the right mix is. But I would be surprised if our committee or the select board recommended that the whole $750,000 be used from the cable fund. That fund should be used for other upgrades to MPEG access as well. This is an important one, but there are others as well.
Thank you. Questions from the committee members, warrant committee members? Christine,
I have a question.
Your hand first.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Can you talk a little bit about, I just want to be clear on something. I think what I saw was that Comcast believes the iNet technology to be obsolete. They're not going to support it any longer. Is the technology that we would be using, it sounds like it would be a different, not obsolete. Can you just talk about the technology a little bit?
Yeah, so they're both fiber optic capabilities. So right now the town has 8 strands of fiber optic cable, and only 6 of them work right now. So the system itself is deteriorating, and the town's use of it is at the maximum capacity. So what we'd be doing is it would be replacing that with new fiber cables, fiber optic cables, and roughly probably 100, 150. I think the CDC report said 188 or something like that, but a significant upgrade to the number of strands. So that would allow the town to meet the capacity it has right now and have a significant room to grow and as demand on the internet continues.
Thank you. So this is not just a version of the obsolete product that Comcast is no longer supporting. It's modern and flexible and can be built upon, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's really comes down to capacity, I think, is the important part of it. So the system right now doesn't have the capacity to handle the town, or it's at 99% right now. So it's going to be a problem very shortly. So this would provide tremendous capacity that'll give cushion for right now and a big cushion for the future as well. At minimal difference in cost, because you're just putting down more strands. The cost isn't in the strands itself; it's in the doing the construction once.
Right.
Do you have some idea about how, I don't want to say overbuilt the system will be? I mean, to anticipate capacity, because what goes through my mind is the example of the Southeast Expressway, which was designed as a WPA project in the 1930s, shelved because of the Second World War, executed in the 1950s with no change in anticipated auto volume, and then is still in use 75 years later and horrifically overburdened. I mean, the question is going to be, is what you are anticipating constructing expecting growth and anticipating for the next X years out, so we don't end up with traffic jams?
Yeah, yes, it is. That strand count is a very high strand count that provides an enormous amount of capacity. At this point, it really would be limited. Fiber optic is it's information traveling at the speed of light, so it's really only limited at this point by the number of strands. But besides that, if it's a large number of strands, then it's only limited by the end users routers and computers. So as those continue to upgrade, then they can continue to benefit from faster speeds on the fiber optic itself. Most computers we're using right now are not even touching as far as I understand, are not even touching the capacity of fiber optic.
JJ, you have a question. Your hand is up.
Hi, thank you. I have a question about costs. Specifically, I'm just wondering about the relative costs of each system. So if you could give us an idea of the monthly cost of the iNet system that is in place now, and the monthly cost of the Comcast business system that would replace it as an alternative, and then a monthly maintenance cost of the proposed system. So we kind of have an idea of what would be the cost.
We agree that those are important considerations. That's what the committee is beginning to look into now. The figure that we have from CTC is purely for construction costs. It's our opinion that we would have to bring in an engineer to create a detailed design plan for implementation of the iNet replacement in order to know what those expenses are. We don't have that information at this time, but we've identified that as an important issue, and we're looking into it.
And I can just supplement very briefly. We're paying $1,000. They gave us a good deal when we negotiated the Comcast agreement. We're paying $1,000 a month now, which is very cheap. My guess is it'll be more than that. The maintenance fee will be more than that, and maybe quite a bit more than that going forward. But that's something we need to work on and get to. And I think we can do it. I think we can probably get some estimates on that, ballpark estimates on that before we have a project manager who can come in and nail down the exact figure. I think we can get some ballpark estimates for you on that.
So
Other questions?
I guess just to follow up with the approval, are we approving $1 million now and then getting the cost estimate later, or how's that working?
No. What we're seeking is just the use of funds from the cable fund. Where there's $750,000 that's sitting in a fund, not being used right now. And we're asking that some portion of that, and we need to figure out what the right portion of that is, some portion of that $750,000 be used to build a new INET. And the ultimate idea is to use some portion of that plus the ARPA funds, so there's no cost. There's no cost associated with it, no additional cost to the town associated with it. And the cable fund money comes from fees that are paid from the cable companies into a fund based on the franchise agreements, right? And that money's been collected over a long period of time. It occasionally has been used for cameras and cables, but there's a fair amount of money sitting in that fund right now, and we think that this would be a good use for it. Not all of it, but we think this would be a good use for it.
My sense, honestly, is that it would be more straightforward to go to the town meeting with a dollar figure and a breakdown. Is that going to, I guess my question is that going to happen? Because I'm hesitant to take a vote of the warrant committee without that information.
Totally intend to do that. We just need to get with the town administrator and get with the select board, because the select board decides on the ARPA funds. But whatever we think the director of finance and the town administrator have a good idea about how much of the ARPA funds we should use for this. And we just need to work with them on that. And I expect that that'll be done before the end of this month.
That would be helpful, because, as I say, we need to construct the warrant, before starting by the end of the month. So as soon as we have that figure, I think we'd be very happy to further discuss it. And I think that there's a sense that I've gotten over the past several weeks, months, and a couple of years now, that there would be support for it among our membership. And I think the town meeting would just think this is great, personally. But once you have that, we'll be very happy to see it. And we'll be happy to give you our recommendation on that when it comes. Any other questions before we move along? Rob and Mike, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate, Rob, especially the work that you did and that you're continuing to do. So keep up the good work. And next time you come, you don't have to get so dressed up. You look very nice, but don't put yourself to the trouble.
All right. Thanks very much. Thanks for your time. Have a good night.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Really grateful for your time. Okay, our next item on the agenda is we're talking about the warrant article concerning our fees payable to the town council. And Dr. Christensen, Cindy Christensen, who's a town meeting member, has come to speak to us about some of her concerns. So please take it away, all yours.
Thank you. I will share my screen. All right, so I'm here tonight to share with you some of my concerns regarding town council services and fees. For the sake of time, I'm not going to read all of this, but I did send you the material earlier, and I asked that you review it. I have
we did get it. Thank you very much. It's very helpful.
Yeah, good. There are 6 reasons why the warrant committee should question the select board's article. Number 1, the town is paying for retainer fee invoices as if they're flat monthly fees. They cannot be both. Number 2, the town does not possess adequate itemized records to know what taxpayers are being charged for under the retainer fee. If no one is requiring and then reviewing itemized billing for retainer and special legal fees, how do we know if fund shifting between these 2 accounts isn't happening already? Number 3, there is no current contract or agreement for legal services, and there hasn't been one for at least 15 years, maybe 35. I'll let you read items 4 and 5 and move on to number 6 on the next slide. It says, besides a fund transfer, there are many ways to reduce the claimed explosion in hours billed to retainer because of public records requests. For example, figure out why town council is now doing so much of the public records work. Most towns use the town clerk's office for this. Have there been select board actions and decisions that are causing the increase? Also, make meeting material available to the public along with meeting agenda. Something not written on this slide is that the town should enact the public archive feature of the records request portal. At a minimum, I ask that you require these 4 things before supporting this article. Number 1, require the select board to enter into an agreement for legal services. 2, change retainer to monthly fee or vice versa. MHTL bills using the word retainer. Town meeting voted on retainer appropriations. Number 3, require all legal fee invoices to be itemized and these itemized records be reviewed and retained by the town. A report is needed to show that there is no current funding shift. Although not required by Massachusetts municipal finance law, according to the Inspector General's office, it is, quote, strongly recommended that towns make requests for proposals for town legal services, especially not having done so for at least 15 years. The warrant committee should require that the town make a request for bids for legal services prior to the fiscal year 23 discussions about appropriations. I personally will question the motives of anyone who is against the town going through a bid process. Now I'd like to share with you some of the details that I found from doing my research. This is a budget page from a nearby municipality that also uses MHTL for town council services. They use the word retainer correctly. If you notice fiscal year 2019, the retainer fee was drawn down. In fiscal year 20, it was not. Why is it important to call a retainer retainer and a flat monthly fee a flat monthly fee? It's important for clarity and also because prepaying any town service is a violation of municipal finance law. And that is what can easily happen when a town pays a retainer as if it's a flat monthly fee. I've provided you with contact information that you can check this for yourself. Milton town officials, including town meeting members, must start to ask for second opinions. Why? Because no matter how many times we say it, a proposal is not a contract or an agreement. We are relying on legal advice from a firm that we have paid, but that has not required a contract for or agreement for us for at least 15 years. To me, that's unprofessional. Here was my request: records of contracts for town council services between MHTL and the town of Milton for the last 15 years. Here was MHTL's response. The proposals included herein were submitted to the select board for approval. So note the word contract in the request and proposals in the response. Like me, perhaps you wonder, why are there no select board approval documents? When I asked Chair Conlon, she wrote, the select board does not enter into written documentation with town council about retainer amounts after town meeting. There is no need to do so. Town council takes part in the annual warrant preparation process and discussions, is present at town meetings, and is aware of what the town meeting votes to appropriate. When I asked the IGO attorney about this response, he said, of course there is a need to do so. For one thing, MHTL is not mentioned in the warrant article. Also, participating in the process and discussion does not create a contract for legal services just because someone says it does. Neither does being aware of appropriation amounts. When I asked the IGO what steps I could take to correct these possible violations if I can't get the select board to talk with me, he responded that I should talk with the warrant committee chair. This is why I am here today, but obtaining public records and getting here to talk with you was not easy. What happened that should not have happened? Chair Conlon tacitly refused my request to meet with her about this. Also, to get the town to provide my records request, I had to appeal to the Secretary of State multiple times. I wrote 2 letters to the editor of the Milton Times. This is not transparency. The warrant committee invited me to a meeting and later decided there wasn't time for me. Why wasn't there time for me? I don't know.
I'll interrupt on that one. I never said there wasn't time for you. I said we had a very full agenda and we would address it when the time came forward. So I'll appreciate you being accurate in your characterizations of our back and forth. Thank you. That's why.
I'll go on to say, I do know that having to work this hard to get questions answered is not a characteristic of transparency in town government. That having to turn to outside of Milton experts for clarity about town legal fee demands that we not, quote, trust the process as we're often told we should do, but instead we need to question it. That to have to use the local press and the Secretary of State to obtain timely public records casts doubt on whether the town is handling taxpayer dollars responsibly. In 2015, the late Milton Times reporter Laura Griffin wrote a commentary called Real Debate versus Attack Mode. I've included the entire article in the packet of information that I provided, and I obtained permission to share the copyright material with you and the public. Laura knew Milton's town government and wrote about needed changes to its culture. 6 years later, her wise words are still relevant today. Here's a sample, quote, and he's right. If you're not on the popular or official side of an issue, be prepared to be ignored or subject to personal attacks. She also wrote, just as troubling is the trend toward ignoring those with real questions, real information. At least 3 people can legitimately claim that they've been blackballed from Milton committees because they ask too many questions, dig too deep, and they know too much. I will end by saying could people mute, please? I will end by saying I won't let my concerns be ignored, and I'm prepared for the personal attacks that history shows could follow, because some will say that I've asked too many questions, dug too deeply, and found out too much. Were you able to hear me with the interruptions from somebody's microphone?
I think everybody heard. Did we have anybody who has any questions for Dr. Christensen? Do you want to take down your screen so I can see who might be asking questions?
Sure. Sorry.
Okay. Do we have questions as how this relates particularly to our article to increase the fee payable to Murphy-Hesse from 65,000 to 75,000 specifically? I understand the concerns that you have. I will still indicate to you, as I have, ours is not an audit function. We have in the past made recommendations across the board to the town that they should engage in competitive bidding, whether it deals with the services for town council or for virtually anything else. So that is something that has happened during my tenure as warrant committee chair, and I understand that it may have happened in the past as well. Citing that as a condition may not necessarily be in our purview for this particular article, but I'd have to get counsel on that anyway. But I will ask if there are any further questions for Dr. Christensen as it specifically relates to our fees to Murphy-Hesse. Okay. Dr. Christensen, do you have anything else you'd like to share with us?
I would like to request that the material that I provided to your committee be made part of today's meeting record.
It'll be included. We include all the presentations.
Okay, thank you.
So anyway, listen, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time and your concern and certainly your conscientiousness as a town meeting member is admirable.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, our next, John, John.
I'm gonna have to recuse myself from any of these votes because I do work for 2 principal owners.
Okay. Okay, understood. Okay. When we get to that, we'll remember that.
But I want it on record now, right?
Okay, that's good. We also have a recusal on the Wharf Street article as well. if we can do this, Katie, you're still on, yes? Do you want to talk about the Wharf Street article, the purchase of the Wharf Street property, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll invite my colleagues to chime in as they like. I'm going to give a brief summary, and then if there are questions or if there are anything else that members of the board would like to add, perhaps they could do so. I saw a hand up. I don't know if it's relating to 41 Wharf.
Yeah, just Kristen Cosale. I just was told by the ethics attorney before any discussions, I just need to publicly disclose that I'm here as a resident, I won't be voting on this just because of a disclosed conflict of interest.
That's true. Thank you, Kristen. Okay, Katie, take it away. All yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So for the article relating to 41 Wharf, the select board is looking for authorization to acquire approximately 10,000 square foot parcel at 41 Wharf Street. At the end of last week, we provided a lot of information that was in an email from town council that included a map of the property. I think this map may have been drawn by our former planning director, Bill Clark. It goes back a few years. But essentially the parcel that we're looking at in the map is highlighted in yellow in the middle of the orange box, for lack of a better way to describe this. 41 Wharf Street is adjacent to the riverfront at the Milton Yacht Club location that's owned by the town, has been leased to the Milton Yacht Club under a lease that is expired, but by agreement of our board and the Board of Park Commissioners several years ago was allowed to continue month to month while we went through a master plan implementation committee process and a lot of planning and discussion about this area, at which members of the 88 Wharf Condo Association, the Yacht Club, the Neighborhood Association in the greater Forbes Hill Road area took part in at different times. So we've gone through a lot of planning. The master plan implementation committee put forward a proposal with a lot of ideas for how to increase public access at the waterfront and make it more user-friendly for families to come down to the waterfront and kayak or have picnics or just passive recreation. So that's really what drove a lot of this process. And we're at the point, our board has had a long process of discussion with the 88 Wharf Condominium Association, which owns this particular parcel, but under the permit for its construction back in 2002, had given 3 easements to the town. 2 of them were permanent easements, but this easement that we're talking about and seeking now to acquire the property and not hold only an easement is one that was originally a 12-year easement for water dependent uses at the site. And there's a lot of boat storage on the property at present. And was renewed for 5 or 6 years on a 1-year basis. It's been renewed. Our board recently signed, and you should have it in the materials, a 6-month extension through the end of this calendar year for this waterfront parcel. We're now looking to acquire it from 88 Wharf Condominium Association. And you'll see in the memorandum of agreement that we've provided that the proposal is, obviously we need the full condominium association. We need, I think it's 75% of the condominium unit owners need to consent. We need a town meeting vote, and both are preconditions in order for this to happen. Condominium association would be transferring the property to the board or to the town, and the board would be acquiring this for nominal consideration and also receiving from the condominium association a payment of $75,000. The reason for that payment is there's been a lot of boat activity, painting, repair at this site for a long time. The area has been paved for a very long time. I'm not quite sure for how long. And if any of my colleagues have any detail on that, they can feel free to weigh in. This waterfront area was originally part of a commercial area for the town over 100 years ago, and it grew up as a residential but largely commercial area. So the property is paved over. There's been a lot of painting of boats, changing of oil, other activities at the site, so that our board thought that we needed to at least get a phase 1 environmental assessment done and see whether there might be any environmental concerns here. We've provided a link to the phase 1 report, which is about 500 pages. It's pretty long. If you look at the executive summary, it shows that the report was really inconclusive. And because there were some unknowns and it's not clear what activity took place historically before the lot was paved, the phase one really couldn't rule out that there could be some soil contaminations. No knowledge of it, but it was inconclusive. And we talked about doing a phase two with the condominium association. And instead of doing that, which would require borings into the site and testing of soil, the condominium association, after negotiation, has proposed to pay the town $75,000 over 5 years. So all of that is laid out in the MOA. And this is in the process of being signed. Our board has already voted to approve this. We'll get you a signed copy once we have everyone's signatures on it, both our board as well as the condo association representatives. So that's essentially it in a nutshell. What we're trying to do would be, rather than continuing these easements year after year and not being able to make long-term plans for recreation and water dependent usage at the site, we're looking to acquire the property from 88 Wharf Condominium Association for the town's use and going forward.
Questions for on this article? Let's see. Oh, Kathy, please.
Just a quick question. So the board of 88 Wharf will pay us $75,000, and what is it that we are paying them to purchase it? You said it was a nominal amount?
It's $1 or $10 fee. It's essentially we're not paying anything other than a minor amount, a nominal amount like that.
With the
They're
transaction.
paying us $75,000, and I should have probably mentioned the board's plans for the $75,000 will be to create a fund that could be used down the road if we do have any environmental issues. So we'll be targeted for that purpose.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I don't see any hands up. Okay. All right, Katie, thank you very much. And I'm guessing that the condominium group is in favor of this, or do we know yet?
The Board of Trustees is, and they've been represented by counsel who's been negotiating with town council. The section 5 of the MOA requires a vote of 75% of the condominium unit owners. So we have the burden of getting a positive vote from town meeting. And they have, the condo association has the burden of getting 3/4 of their members.
Okay. Is there an expiration on this?
Well, no, but the present easement expires December 31st. So we would need to back and extend that.
I guess that was more than my question.
So
Yeah.
that's why we wanted to bring this in October.
The time is kind of the essence. Otherwise, you have to go renegotiate the easement.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Okay, terrific. Any other questions about this article? Okay, terrific. Thank you. Thank you very much, Katie.
Thank you.
We have been told that the planning board has withdrawn its land removal, its earth removal bylaw amendment, and is going to, I guess, do a little more work on it. So I think that brings us now to votes for certain of these articles. And I think we can probably take a couple of them now anyway, even if we don't take all of them. So we received the articles from in the form which we must obviously consider them. Just let me pull those up here and then we'll be in good shape. Right. I think the numbering of the articles at this point has not been finalized. Am I correct in that?
Well, we have the numbered 1 through 8, Mr. Chair, but with the planning board looking to withdraw their article, we'll vote that at our meeting on the 25th and renumber the articles. But
Okay.
aside from just sequentially renumbering them,
Yeah, we can vote on the articles as they're presented, irrespective of the numbering then. Okay, and Lynn, just please keep track of this one for us. So I think we had, I think given that we're waiting on the cable amount to go from what's going to come out of the cable fund and what's going to come from ARPA, I think we can postpone voting on that one for the time being until we actually see know what the dollar figure is going to be. I think we can vote on the article, let me pull it up here, for 41 Wharf Street. Okay, do we have a motion for the approval of the 41 Wharf Street purchase article.
I'll make a motion, George, that we approve our article listed as number 1 for the purchase of 41 Wharf Street.
Thank you.
Second.
Do we have any discussion on that? Lynn, can you take the roll, please?
We can. Kathy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
JJ,
Yes.
Lorraine,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Christine,
Yes.
Kristen. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you? recuse yourself?
Abstain.
Abstain, okay.
Oh, yeah, Kristen has to abstain.
Yep. Dave,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Emily.
Yes.
Okay, passes.
Thank you very much. The article listed as number 2, the amended zoning bylaw, has been withdrawn. So moving on to Article 3, where we had a presentation from Chase Berkeley last week, we saw the change in the language as suggested by the Attorney General that removes, that puts in place a lien as opposed to another device, which was in place already. For the wording there, we all have the article. Do we have a motion to accept that as presented?
Good. Kathy, I'll make a motion to accept the article listed as number 3 for the stormwater bypass, which is a technical correction from the term special assessment to
Lien.
lien.
Second.
Discussion. This one was pretty straightforward. Lynn, do you want to, hearing no discussion, Lynn, please take the roll.
Kathy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
JJ,
Yes.
Lorraine,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Christine,
Yes.
Kristen,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Emily.
Yes.
Thank you very much. We pass. Article 4 is appropriating monies from the cable fund and ARPA. I think we're going to table that until our next meeting, and by then we should have enough information about it. Article 5 is the amended law budget. We've had a presentation about that. The request is to increase the fee payable from 65 to 75,000. Now, if there are concerns that we want to bring forward, this is the time to bring them up. We can place them in the comment, but I think for our purposes, the issue at hand is, do we amend the budget as presented? Because it's not, as has been presented to us, it's not a change in any of the dollar figures that have been approved by town meeting. It's a question of reallocation. So we take 10,000 out of the special, is it, Katie, the special purpose or special use fund for legal expenses that you characterize it, as opposed to the fee payable, flat fee payable to the town council?
Yes, the line names are professional and special services.
Professional and special services.
You
So that would be
decrease by 10,000.
decreased by 10,000 and increase the flat fee payable. That is specifically the article. We have had voiced concerns by Dr. Christensen, et cetera. If any of those are found to be includable, if you will, in our comment, that's something that we can certainly consider at this point. Discussion on that point.
So George, this is Kathy. I think a lot of information has been shared.
Yes.
And I guess
Right.
I'm some of the conversation that's gone back and forth, it seems like some of these points are not necessarily in the purview of the warrant committee. So if we're just voting on a transfer of funds, I think it would be okay to move ahead. But I guess before we do town meeting, I think we do need to have some answers to some of those questions.
I don't think that's out of line either. I think that's certainly something that we can address possibly in our next meeting. But for the purposes of the article, I think I take your point. Voting on it at this point is probably the right thing to do, and we can discuss some of the concerns and some of the conditions under which we have these arrangements in our next meeting.
Mr. Chair, our board is here tonight. We're happy to answer any questions that members of the committee may have. provided information at your August 2nd meeting and also in writing.
Yes.
Follow up, but if there are questions that the committee has, you know,
Well, I guess the question is, and I don't think it's an unreasonable one either, is as we look forward to having, we do competitive bids with all kinds of services in town. Is there a reason not to do this with the legal fees? I know Murphy Hesse, I mean, I am extremely cognizant of how much time Kevin Freitag puts in, and I take liberal use of his expertise, as do many other chairs of the town boards. And I understand that the more time we use, the lower his fee per hour goes. And I was joking after a fashion when I saw the last calculation you made. I said, my God, I think I just paid my plumber more than Kevin Freitag got per hour for the last few months. So I guess the question is it within the scope of how we do business now to look at, I know there are a finite number of firms who do municipal finance anyway, but it is an exercise that we can look at or urge even to look at a competitive bid situation at some point?
So Mr. Chair, I can answer that, and then I'd like to invite my colleagues to answer it as well. Our board and the warrant committees over the years have had conversations along these lines. There are pros and cons. For example, the town went out to bid on the audit services after using Powers and Sullivan for a very long time to do our audit work. We didn't get a lot of interest in that. We ended up with Powers and Sullivan after we went out to bid. So I bring that point up to say that just because you go out to bid doesn't necessarily mean that there would be a change and that's retained. There are pros and cons. On the one hand, having a good relationship with town council where there's been positive comments about the work done, there's been no problems identified, there have been no issues that the board has perceived or has heard from any other boards, and having an institutional knowledge of the town, of the parties that are involved, the different cases and the different issues that are before the town over the years, that there's a lot of benefits to having the institutional knowledge that having a longtime town council brings. There are a lot of litigation cases that take years. So, Murphy Hesse's been representing the town now in a lot of cases that have gone on for quite a long period of time. On the other hand, going out to bid might show that there's interest in the market from another provider. It is a small universe of firms that provide these services. So our board had some discussions about this early, either right before the pandemic or right after it began, and it really took a back seat to the pandemic. It's something that we may consider again, but it's really an executive function, and it's something that would be a decision of the board as to whether we want to do that. There's, as I said, there's a lot of good reasons to continue with town council because we've had good service at a good rate from town council. And,
understood.
And it's a relationship that has worked well for our predecessors as well as for this board.
Yes. Kathy, question.
So I understand that, and I think that you are 100% accurate in terms of having some longevity and some history on that. What would be the problem in us having an actual contract? And secondly, what would be an issue in getting some kind of a detailed listing of what the services were that have been provided on a periodic basis?
So as I explained on the second, there are multiple ways of doing this. You can have an engagement letter that's signed every year by the board, or it's signed at some point by a board. Boards change over. The way Milton has traditionally handled this since John Flynn was appointed as town council in 1989 was that the board appoints town council through a vote and usually a short appointment form. And town council each year either submits a fee proposal or lets the board and sometimes through the town administrator, either the board chair or the town administrator, know that they're not seeking an increase in fees. And the board decides to submit a law budget to the warrant committee for consideration, the way we approve other budget requests that go to the warrant committee based upon what the request from town council is. So back in the fall winter of 2018, when we were starting the process for the FY 2020 budget, town council submitted a fee letter that I think you have a copy of that requested an increase in the retainer, which is a flat fee, but the town has historically called it a retainer. Been called a retainer since long before any of us were involved in any of these boards. Town council submitted a request to increase that from 65,000 to 75,000. They also at the same time submitted a request to change the hourly rate for the fees that they charge under professional services, which was, I think, going from 210 to 220 an hour under their request. That was, the select board was in favor of that, submitted that budget reflecting those increased numbers to the warrant committee. The warrant committee 2 years ago was in favor of that because the budget that went to print, and you can look this up in your 2019 warrant, had a recommended amount of $75,000 for the retainer. We were in a situation in which, in particular, the schools and the library were looking to increase their budgets as we got very close to the May town meeting. And a small group of people, I was the chair of the select board's finance committee at the time. Elaine Craighead of the schools was, and still is, the chair of the school finance subcommittee. And we, along with consulting with Cheryl Tugayas, who was the chair of the master plan committee, because we took money out of that budget as well, we made some proposals very shortly before town meeting. I think we were working on it the weekend before town meeting started that Monday night. And we came to the warrant committee and we said, we'd like to try to increase the library and the school budgets by a little bit. Here's where we have identified saving some money in the law budget, the master plan committee's budget, and a couple of other budgets. And we think that this is a good compromise. And you may remember Elaine Craighead and I stood up at town meeting and explained that change. That was after we discussed with both John Flynn and Kevin Freitag the fact that we'd like to reduce the retainer. We also reduced the professional services line. And they were very gracious about that, recognized that we were facing a tough budget challenge and agreed to hold their retainer steady. And we presented that to town meeting voted it. And that they have not requested an increase since then. They were very conscious of the impact that the pandemic had last year on the budget. So that is the process that we follow. There's nothing wrong with getting a contract signed every year by the board, but Milton's practice, again, long before any of us have served on this board, has been to appoint town council and then to go through this fee process each year where we agree. They put in a request, we make a recommendation, the warrant committee makes a recommendation. Ultimately, town meeting votes the budget. I'm not going to respond to everything that was said by Cindy Christensen in the prior comments, but since my name was raised, I will at least indicate to you, I forwarded a copy of that email exchange I had with Cindy to the warrant committee. And if you look at the email exchange, I was answering a specific question about, is there documentation showing a changed, reduced amount after the warrant, after town meeting that town council is going to agree to abide by? And my answer about that not being the way the process is was directed at that question. It certainly was not to say that a town meeting appropriation constitutes a contract. Even I know that that's not the case. So I hope that's helpful, Kathy.
Yeah, it is. And I just in my background, I'm a little bit more of I like documentation, and I don't see anything wrong with having a contract and getting lists of details on what with services. And I've been on the warrant committee for a couple of years, and I can honestly say that we have had lots of questions, and the questions have been responded to in a very efficient manner with a lot of detail, and it's made my job on the warrant committee easy. So I guess I'm not sure what this whole thing is about. I think we could agree to do it, I guess.
Christine, you have a question. Your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. So I totally agree. I think that we need to have a good relationship with our legal counsel, and the cost of not having a good relationship is quite high. But in any case, my question is, Dr. Christensen indicated that the current way we do it has some legal, doesn't follow the mass finance law. Is that your understanding?
That is not our understanding. There's no requirement. Legal services are exempt from the procurement laws. So there's no requirement that you go out to bid for legal services. It's a professional service and it's exempt from that. It's certainly an option that the board has, but it's not a requirement.
Okay, thank you.
I do want to remind the warrant committee that the percentage of the legal and professional services, I just actually calculated it out, for this fiscal year, what we pay the lawyers in total represents 0.25% of our budget, and the flat fee that we pay represents 0.06% of the budget. It's a relatively small amount. I understand principles involved, but I also understand the dollars and cents aren't going to break this camel's back. So that having been said, perhaps we can move the question.
Before you do, can I just add, there was a question
Yeah.
that I think I neglected to answer about detailed billings. So the professional services line is usually a significantly higher amount than the retainer.
Yeah.
Fee. We do get the detailed billings on that. What comes to the town and there's sometimes been inconsistent detailed information that's been provided. There's a cover sheet that has just the total amount. You take the $65,000 and you divide it by 12. And that's what town council bills us for the flat fee during the year. So there's a cover sheet. There's also a 2 or 3 page list that has planning board X amount, open meeting law X amount, select board X amount. There's also very detailed pre-bills that the town has not consistently asked for, and which would have the line item detail telephone conference with Mr. Asher, chair of the warrant committee. We get those on the professional services. We have not consistently received that for over the years, and there's a lot of different people who work in the office at different times. We've had a lot of transition. This transition on the board, this transition in the office, this transition in town council. So the practice has varied a little bit, but we do get detailed billings, and they're certainly available at our request.
Great, thank you.
Routine detailed billings on all litigation and real estate and other transactions that fall under professional services as a matter of routine. That's the normal bill that comes in for professional services.
Well, we certainly appreciate the work that you all do as the town, as the select board, and we appreciate the scrutiny that we all receive from concerned citizens, town meeting members. I mean, this is democracy at its absolute best, I think. And the better that we are at what we do enhances our ability to share and to be as transparent as possible. I think that as we go forward through the process of drafting this, I think we can look in our comment and weigh how we want to address these issues with the town meeting as we put the warrant together. But for the moment, we need to vote on whether we want to increase the allocation to the flat fee payable to the town council. So at this point, I'm going to curtail discussion. We've certainly had a great deal of information shared. I urge you all to read whatever you need to see that's been provided to us from all sources. And I'll ask for a motion to approve this article, or to recommend this article, I should say, to the town meeting.
You go ahead.
Yeah.
You know how to do this better than me.
Okay.
I would like to make a motion that we approve Article 5 to move the $10,000 from the professional and special services to the retainer line, or the flat fee line, however the terminology is.
However we're going to call it, right. Do we have
I
a second?
second that.
Christine, any further commentary? Lynn, please take the roll.
Kathy,
Yes, please.
John,
Recluse myself, please.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Sorry, John.
JJ,
Yes.
Lorraine,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Christine,
Yes.
Kristen,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Emily.
Yes.
Okay, passes.
Terrific. Article 6.
Thank you all very much.
The departmental budgets, fiscal year 20. Sure. Are we going to have this included in the warrant?
Mr. Chair, I think we will have a better sense of that at our meeting on August 25th.
Okay, we'll postpone the vote. We'll postpone the vote on this. That's fine.
Thank you.
I think we should have, and I'm guessing 7 and 8 are also in that same limbo, or no?
We have, town council, I think, provided you a draft recommendation.
Yes.
Include the unpaid bills. We have, the largest piece of that is from the fire building project, and we have Chair Brian Walsh from the fire station building project here who could speak to any questions on that. The others are a list of smaller bills. The issue for the unpaid bills article is that some bills are received after July 15th.
Right, and they aggregated at a very small amount, if I'm remembering properly.
Most of them did. The fire project one was,
That was different.
That was a little bit higher. So it's a little bit under 350,000 in total,
Yeah.
but about.
Brian, are you still with us?
I
Dan
am
Clark.
indeed, and Dan Clark is with us also.
Oh, wow. We have the dream team here.
He means you, Dan.
No, you both do a great job. You have done a wonderful job with this. So please enlighten us. Always glad to have you come.
Brian, you want me to, or?
Yeah, I was just going to say, please, Dan is in the best position to kind of give you a quick summary, and I know your time is special. I do just want to preface it by, again, thanking the Warrant Committee. You guys are the most appreciated committee in town. You're working hard, and we've really appreciated your support. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, so basically, the fees associated with the invoices that are coming in after that July 15th date are kind of two parts. One, I would say a transition of town accountant and others coming on board, getting up to speed, and also some extra scope and fee that was added. So as we transitioned to new town accountant, and she was able to get her bearings, she was going through and checking everything and identified that actually we hadn't executed an amendment for the design development phase, which was the second phase of our project for the design services. And so at that time, without having an executed amendment, we were unable to process the invoice. However, the work had been completed. So by the time we were able to execute the amendments and everything, we just went past the July 15th date. So it's all work and work that was identified within the original RFQ and original scope of work, and was budgeted within our 2 town meeting articles.
And this aggregates at $336,000 that's detailed here?
Correct. I forget the exact dates, but basically when Karen came on board, she needed to get up to speed. She was entering and noticed we didn't have all the contracts executed regarding that amendment. So we kind of hit a pause on paying until we got that figured out. And so that's why the aggregation of that. And a lot of that work was associated to what town meeting saw us present in February and beyond for updates on East Milton and catching that design up to the other 2 stations. So that's why it's the large sum that you see there. East Milton is now pretty much caught up into design development, so it's at the same stage as the other 2 stations, so we keep them on that same path.
Okay. If I could, Mr. Chair, I'd like to just add, Context Architecture has done terrific work for us. Our entire committee is very happy with what they've done. We have actually dragged their time out more than expected because of challenges like getting approval for the piece of property and working with neighbors, both at the headquarters station and East Milton, and having them do multiple iterations. But they've done terrific work. This was and is within the budget that we originally proposed, and we're just catching up on these bills.
This is the design firm that did all 3 of the stations?
Yes,
right.
Oh yeah, they are a gifted group of people. Their designs are really very interesting. And the way they harmonized Bradley Road is really kind of remarkable. I used to drive by that. I used to ride my bicycle up there when I was a little boy. And the firemen used to let us go down the pole. Of course, you can't do anything like that anymore. But I have happy memories of that station. Anyway, so the total that we're looking for now, including the fire station, is $345,000 that would come out of, has it been characterized now as free cash, or is it in one of the funds, Katie?
No, so free cash won't be certified, so it's not coming out of free cash. The large portion from the fire station building committee is already budgeted in the fire.
And it's coming out of their fund?
Coming out of existing funds.
Okay, all right. So basically, we've already allocated this money. We're just recommending the town authorize the payment for it.
Yeah, and if Mr. Chair, if I could just add for the others, there are 4 on the list at very small amounts. And again, I think it's important to note that our new town accountant, Karen Preval, is doing a good job putting a lot of new processes and procedures in place. And some of that, what's being put into place, will probably prevent any need for this going forward. So that we get them out. One of these bills actually came in before July 15th, but because of the internal processes, it didn't reach her office until after July 15th.
Karen, I don't know if you're still on, but thank you for doing all this. I'm aware of the work you're doing, so keep up the good work. It's great.
Thank you.
Oh, you are still with us. Good for you.
I'm still here.
Karen, did you have anything you wanted to add about this article?
I was just going to mention that there are no appropriations for this. The money has been authorized by town meeting.
Okay.
For the context, it's out of the capital fund and we have the money within the other accounts. We're just doing things according to the state requirement around the, just dates in terms of when we're able to make payments for each fiscal year.
Okay, great. Okay, I think we can take a vote on this. Is the committee comfortable? I don't think we need to hear too much more. If that's the case, can we have a motion to approve the unpaid bills appropriation, which is now listed as Article 7?
So moved.
You have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, Lynn, please take the roll.
Certainly. Kathy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
JJ,
Yes.
Lorraine,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Christine,
Yes.
Kristen,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Emily.
Yes.
All set.
Terrific. For whatever reason, I do not have, or I can't find the article on the capital stabilization. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Here, I've got it right here. Terribly sorry. So does anybody, we're talking about a transfer of $600,000 from the capital stabilization to the general fund. Katie or Mike or whomever, can you talk a little bit about this?
Yes, Mr. Chair, this also relates to the fire station building project, and I'd like to ask Mr. Walsh to address it, or Mr. Clark, or a member of our board, because I've been recused on the fire station building project.
Okay.
I think they can address it best.
Okay. Dan or Brian, we're all ears. Did we lose you?
I'm here. I think we lost Dan, which I apologize. So could you clarify the question then? I missed.
Oh, I'm sorry. The capital stabilization, we're transferring 600,000 from capital stabilization to the general fund. And we are told it's related to the fire station building.
Yeah,
Mr. Chair, Mike Dennehy here. I might be able to help.
Hi, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brian, I don't want to step on your toes.
No, go
for
ahead,
all the great work you're doing, but 2 years ago, the town parked $600,000 in the capital stabilization fund in order to cover some anticipated expenses should these projects get underway. And now that they are, this is a bit of housekeeping to pull that money from cap stabilization, put it back into the general fund so that it can be used as we go forward.
For just general expenses associated with the three projects.
Correct. Yep.
And okay, all right. Are we all clear? I mean, I actually, now that you remind me of this, I remember having done that. I just have to go back and look at my notes about all these things.
We did just, if it might help, we did something similar but opposite when we retrofit the 3,300 streetlights in town. We borrowed from cap stabilization and then
and we reversed it.
We reversed it, correct.
Okay. So this is the same book. It's effectively a bookkeeping normalization.
Yes, and it gives the fire station building committee general funding to continue.
The cash that they need. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on this article? If none, the chair will entertain a motion to recommend it to town meeting.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, John. Any further discussion? Okay, Lynn, can you take the roll, please?
Sure can. Kathy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
JJ,
Yes.
Lorraine,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Christine,
Yes.
Kristen,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Emily.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Great. Thank you all very much. Our next agenda item is to assign comments for these articles based upon some of the things that we still have to get information on and some of the discussion points that we heard on other of our articles, not just the legal fee article, but others. I'm going to recommend that we postpone assigning comments until we have all the information in hand. And then we'll have a better idea of who is going to feel comfortable drafting which comment. I mean, there's going to be 6 or 7 of them. So I think that we don't have to kill ourselves on this, and we still will have at least a couple of weeks. I also recommend that we have our next meeting on the 30th, 2 weeks from tonight, as the 23rd appears to be problematic for a number of people. And we'll need to have as many of us here in our meeting as we can, just to make all these things clean and neat. So if there is no objection to that, we'll postpone that agenda item and take it up at our next meeting. And setting our meeting date, which is our final item, will be August 30th at 7. And I hope you can all make it. It will be another Zoom meeting, which I think is a little bit easier because we're still to some extent in vacation mode. And it's a little bit easier for us to get comments and the expert opinions that we need and input in this format. So if there is no other business, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, I saw Mr. Zulus with his hand up on our, we have to.
I'm sorry. Hang on.
Adjourn too before we go off air.
I wanted to move to adjourn our meeting first.
Oh, I think that's probably appropriate.
I wanted to get out before you guys.
Well,
you want a motion, Madam Chair? You want a motion to adjourn?
Well, yeah, but let the warrant committee go first. I think Mike was kidding.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess we will then. Okay. So the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn the warrant committee.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a second. Any discussion? Lynn, please take the roll.
Kathy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
JJ,
Yes.
Lorraine,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Christine,
Yes.
Kristen,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Steve, and
Yes.
Emily.
Yes.
Okay.
We need a
Thanks.
motion.
We're adjourned.
And we need a motion to adjourn our meeting.
I'll make a motion to adjourn, Madam Chair.
Second.
All in favor, Arthur,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Belinda,
Yes.
and me, yes. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
Good
you all.
night. Have a good week.
Have a good night. Thank you for
Thank you very
all your
much.
efforts.
Thank you
Good
for your
night.
work.